Go live in the streets, old man. My son yelled. He didn't know my empty wallet was funding his entire lifestyle. The chill of the autumn evening seeped into Augustus Thorne's bones, a familiar physical sensation that rarely bothered him. Yet, tonight, it was the icy dialogue from his opulent study that truly froze him to the core. He had been quietly making his way to the kitchen for a cup of chamomile tea, his usual nightly ritual, a small comfort in the vast, often silent mansion. The soft lamplight from the hallway cast long, dancing shadows, guiding his steps until a rising inflection in his son Cale's voice, followed by Seraphina's distinctive purr, pulled him to an involuntary halt. They were discussing their upcoming vacation, a grand tour of the Mediterranean, a lavish escape that had seemingly evolved from a modest plan into an extravagant odyssey, complete with private yacht charters, exclusive island excursions, and Michelin-starred dining experiences. Augustus had inadvertently overheard snippets of their planning over the past few weeks, hushed phone calls, excited whispers about itineraries, and dismissive comments about budget. But it was this particular conversation, unfiltered and brutally honest, that made his heart clench with a familiar ache, an old wound reopened with fresh salt. And imagine, darling, Seraphina purred, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction, a sound that grated on Augustus's ears like sandpaper on velvet. Augustus still thinks we're just going to that quaint little resort in Tuscany. He'll never know we upgraded to the full grand tour, will he? It's simply divine. The travel agent assured me the private jet experience is unparalleled. Cale chuckled, a harsh, dismissive sound devoid of warmth or genuine amusement. Of course not. Let the old man keep his delusions. He's too frail for all that travel anyway. Besides, who wants him tagging along, cramping our style? He'd just complain about the prices, demand early dinners, and bore everyone with stories of his youth. We need this to be our time, free from his quaint sensibilities. A tremor ran through Augustus, a profound physical and emotional shock. He had, in fact, gently suggested a few days earlier that he might join them for a small part of the trip, perhaps a quiet week in a villa along the Amalfi coast. Cale had brushed him off, citing logistical complexities and their need for a romantic getaway, just the two of them. Augustus had accepted it then, attributing it to his son's desire for privacy, a natural evolution of a son's life. Now, the truth, stark and ugly, lay exposed before him. He wasn't excluded for their romance or for his supposed frailty. He was excluded because he was perceived as a nuisance, a relic, a burden to be kept out of sight, tolerated only for his financial contributions. The realization hit him like a physical blow, stripping away years of carefully constructed paternal hope. He pushed open the study door, his presence immediately silencing their conspiratorial whispers. Cale and Seraphina started, their faces contorting into a mask of forced cheerfulness, a performance Augustus had seen far too many times. "Father!" "What a pleasant surprise," Seraphina chirped, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, which still held traces of their recent conspiratorial glee. "Just discussing our little getaway." Augustus's gaze, usually kind and gentle, softened by years of quiet suffering, was now clear and unwavering, cutting through their pretense like a surgeon's scalpel. "Indeed. A little getaway that seems to have expanded quite significantly without his knowledge," he stated, his voice low, devoid of anger, but laced with an undeniable steel that startled them both. He heard their conversation. Every word. About his delusions, about him being too frail, about him cramping their style if he were to join. Cale's face contorted, a mixture of shock, indignation, and a flicker of fear. His privileged existence had rarely, if ever, been challenged, especially not by his seemingly docile father. "Father, don't be ridiculous. You misunderstood. We were just planning details. It's not a big deal. You're always welcome, of course, but you know how chaotic these things can get." His voice trailed off, the lie transparent. "Not a big deal?" Augustus echoed, his voice still quiet, but the words hitting like precisely aimed darts. He was footing a substantial portion of this little getaway, was he not? just as he had footed a substantial portion of everything in their lives for decades. And yet, he was deemed a burden, a relic to be kept out of sight, even as his empty wallet funded their entire extravagant lifestyle. He looked at Cale, a profound sadness in his eyes. He believed he was building a legacy for them, not merely an endless supply of funds. Cale's jaw clenched, his face flushing crimson. The accusation of being a burden, especially when the source of his privilege was confronting him, was an affront to his inflated ego. He had always seen Augustus's wealth as his own by right, an endless wellspring from which to draw, a natural inheritance. His eyes narrowed, and the carefully constructed facade of filial respect shattered completely, revealing the raw contempt beneath. He leaned forward, his voice rising, venomous and dripping with a cruel disdain that made Augustus flinch internally. "Go live in the streets, old man," Cale bellowed, his voice echoing through the opulent study, stripping away any last pretense of familial affection. "You're a relic, living off your dead wife's money anyway, just give us what we need. Stop acting like you're some kind of martyr. It's our inheritance, not yours, you just happen to be holding on to it." Serafina, initially stunned by Cale's raw outburst, now nodded vehemently, her eyes flashing with agreement, emboldened by her husband's words. "He's right, Augustus. You're an old-fashioned bore. Just sign over the funds and go back to your quiet life. We don't need your interference. You've had your time." The words hung in the air, heavy with a brutal disrespect that pierced Augustus deeper than any physical blow could have. "Go live in the streets, old man." The phrase, so callous, so utterly devoid of gratitude or affection, struck a chord that vibrated with decades of suppressed pain and disappointment. It was the final, definitive straw. He looked at his son, then at Serafina, and saw not family, but two entitled strangers, their faces contorted by greed and contempt. A profound, almost spiritual calm settled over Augustus, a clarity that was both chilling and liberating. The years of sacrifice, the quiet yearning for connection, the endless giving, it all coalesced into a single, undeniable truth. He was being used, and he had allowed it. But no longer. With a quiet, almost imperceptible nod, a gentle tilt of his head that acknowledged the end of an era, Augustus turned and walked out of the study, leaving Cale and Serafina standing in their gilded cage, utterly oblivious to the earthquake they had just unleashed. The silence that followed him was not merely the absence of sound, but the sound of an ending, and a beginning. Augustus Thorne had not always been a man who quietly endured. In his youth, he had been a driven, if somewhat reserved, architect, known for his meticulous designs and innovative approaches to urban planning. His world had been transformed, however, when he met Eleanor Vance, a woman of extraordinary grace, sharp intelligence, and immense inherited wealth. Their love story was one for the ages, a deep, abiding connection that transcended their different backgrounds. Eleanor, a true matriarch and a shrewd businesswoman, had built a formidable business empire from scratch, expanding her family's textile manufacturing into global luxury brands. Upon her passing 10 years prior, a decade marked by Augustus's profound grief, she had left everything to him, trusting him implicitly to manage it for their family's future, particularly for their only son, Cale, and his burgeoning family. Eleanor had always been the more astute and perhaps, the more cautious one. She had seen glimpses of Cale's burgeoning entitlement even then, a certain casual disregard for the value of money, a tendency to expect rather than earn. She had expressed subtle worries to Augustus, concerns that he, blinded by a father's boundless love and a widower's all-consuming grief, had chosen to see only the best in his son. He remembered Eleanor's words, gentle yet firm, whispered from her deathbed, her voice raspy but clear, "Augustus, take care of Cale, but don't let him lose his way. Teach him the value of what he has, not just the abundance. Let him build, not just consume." He had promised her he would, a promise that now, in the chilling aftermath of Cale's outburst, felt like a cruel irony, a testament to his own failure. In the decade since Eleanor's passing, Augustus had poured his heart, soul, and indeed, every available penny of the vast fortune into Cale's life, believing it was what Eleanor would have wanted, believing it would secure Cale's happiness and future. He had seen it as his sacred duty, a way to honor Eleanor's legacy and provide for the next generation. The sheer scale of his generosity was staggering, a silent river of wealth flowing into a bottomless pit. He had started by ensuring Cale and Serafina lived in unparalleled luxury, a lifestyle befitting their self-proclaimed status. The sprawling mansion, a magnificent testament to their self-indulgence, with its grand ballroom, Olympic-sized swimming pool, and sprawling landscaped gardens, had been purchased entirely by Augustus. He had paid the down payment of a staggering $1.5 million from his own accounts, money that had been Eleanor's, and for the past 10 years, the monthly mortgage payments at $28,000, along with property taxes exceeding $70,000 annually, were meticulously paid by him. He had taken care of every utility bill, electricity, gas, water, internet, even the absurdly expensive high-definition cable package that broadcast endless reality shows Serafina adored and Cale barely noticed. He even covered the salaries of their domestic staff, Maria, the meticulous housekeeper, the 2 full-time gardeners who kept the grounds pristine, the pool cleaner who visited twice a week, and periodically, a personal chef for their elaborate dinner parties, an expense that often exceeded a small family's annual income. The Thorne family's garage was a testament to Augustus's largesse, a rotating showcase of automotive luxury. Cale drove a sleek, obsidian Mercedes S-Class, a vehicle Augustus had purchased outright for over $150,000, replacing it every 3 years at Cale's casual suggestion. Serafina, not to be outdone, insisted on a new Porsche Cayenne every 2 years, each lease agreement, averaging $1,800 a month, landing on Augustus's desk without question. And for his grandsons, Liam and Ethan, the moment they turned 16 and obtained their licenses, brand-new luxury cars appeared in the driveway, a sporty BMW Z4 for Liam, a powerful Audi A5 for Ethan. Augustus had seen their delighted faces, their fleeting, almost perfunctory hugs, and believed, perhaps naively, that these gifts were fostering love and gratitude, not merely enabling dependence and expectation. Their closets were another bottomless pit of expenditure. Serafina had an insatiable appetite for designer fashion, her shopping sprees legendary among her friends. Augustus's financial statements were littered with charges from high-end boutiques, Chanel, Hermes, Louis Vuitton, often totaling tens of thousands in a single month. He remembered one particular incident when Serafina had called him, distraught, claiming she absolutely needed a limited edition Birkin bag that cost more than some people's annual salaries. Augustus, wanting to avoid a scene, and still believing it would bring her genuine joy, had wired the $25,000 without a second thought. Cale, meanwhile, enjoyed tailored suits from Savile Row, bespoke Italian shoes, and exclusive watches, each costing more than Augustus's own humble sedan, all paid for by his father. The grandchildren's education was also entirely Augustus's responsibility. Liam and Ethan attended the most prestigious private schools, their annual tuition fees, close to $50,000 per child, meticulously paid by Augustus. He covered their extracurricular activities, Liam's expensive private tennis coaching, Ethan's equally costly art lessons, and their frequent trips abroad with school groups. He even funded their college education, setting up substantial trust funds that he topped up annually, ensuring they would graduate debt-free, a luxury few young people could imagine. He had hoped these investments would lead to well-rounded, grateful individuals, but they seemed only to reinforce the notion that money grew on trees, tended by a perpetually generous grandpa. The signs of their growing entitlement and disrespect had been subtle at first, veiled beneath a thin veneer of politeness, then increasingly overt. Family gatherings, once warm and frequent when Eleanor was alive, dwindled to obligatory appearances where Augustus felt like a checkbook in a chair, consulted only when a new financial request was about to be made. Cale and Serafina would often host lavish parties, filling their mansion with friends and acquaintances, but Augustus was rarely invited, or if he was, it was with a casual, "Oh, father, you can come if you like, but it might be a bit loud for you." He once overheard Serafina telling a friend, a dismissive wave of her hand accompanying her words, "It's so much easier when Augustus isn't here." He asks too many questions about our spending and brings down the mood. His simple life, his preference for quiet evenings with a book or a walk in the park, became a source of ridicule. Still reading those dusty old novels, father? Cale would sneer, brandishing his new, state-of-the-art gaming console. Don't you ever want to live a little? Try something new for once? Serafina would often make pointed comments about his frugality, a stark contrast to their own profligate spending. Oh, Augustus, you're still driving that old sedan? How quaint. Don't you think it's time for an upgrade, considering, you know? She meant, considering the vast sums he was pouring into their lives. He was rarely consulted on major decisions, despite being the financial backbone. When Cale decided to invest in a dubious startup venture, a crypto mining operation that sounded suspiciously like a pyramid scheme, he simply presented Augustus with the wire transfer details, expecting immediate compliance. Augustus, who had built a career on sound financial principles, had tried to offer advice, to caution Cale. Son, have you thoroughly vetted this? The risk seemed considerable. Have you consulted with a financial analyst? Cale had scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. Father, please. You don't understand modern finance. It's a new era. Just send the money. It's a goldmine. Augustus, unwilling to cause a rift, and always hoping for a spark of independence and responsibility in Cale, had sent the $500,000, which, predictably, vanished within months, the startup collapsing in a cloud of digital dust. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the loss, just a new request for another venture a few weeks later, as if the previous failure had never occurred. His grandsons, Liam and Ethan, while not as overtly cruel as their parents, had also absorbed the toxic entitlement. Their conversations with Augustus almost always revolved around their material desires: a new gaming PC, the latest smartphone, money for a concert ticket, a designer jacket. They rarely asked about his day, his health, or his thoughts. He remembered a Christmas when he had lovingly handcrafted intricate wooden toys for them, a skill he had learned in his youth and cherished. They had opened them with perfunctory nods, a quick, almost imperceptible glance, then immediately turned their attention to the expensive electronics their parents had given them. Cool, Grandpa, Liam had mumbled, already engrossed in his new drone, but where's the Xbox? Dad said you'd get me the new one. Ethan had simply tossed his handcrafted wooden train aside, preferring the noise and flashing lights of his new tablet. Augustus's attempts at genuine connection were met with indifference or impatience. He once tried to recount a story from his own childhood, a poignant memory about his grandfather, a simple man who taught him the value of hard work. Cale had yawned loudly, checking his watch. Father, that's lovely. But I have a golf game in 20 minutes, and I need to iron my shirt. Serafina would often interrupt him mid-sentence, changing the subject to a new piece of jewelry she coveted or a social event she was planning, her attention span seemingly limited to matters concerning her own desires. The emotional toll of this one-sided relationship had been immense. Augustus lived in a wing of the mansion, a magnificent space yet often feeling like a gilded prison. He ate most of his meals alone, walked in the vast gardens in solitary contemplation, and spent his evenings reading, trying to fill the void left by Eleanor and the absence of true familial warmth. He saw Cale and Serafina only when they needed something, their smiles brightening with an almost alarming speed when a financial request was about to be made, only to dim again once the transaction was complete. He yearned for genuine conversation, for shared laughter, for the simple comfort of being truly seen and appreciated. But instead, he received only demands, veiled condescension, and the chilling realization that his immense fortune, intended as a blessing, had become a curse, enabling the very contempt that slowly chipped away at his spirit, corroding his hope. That final, brutal outburst, "Go live in the streets, old man. You're a relic, living off your dead wife's money anyway, just give us what we need," had shattered the last vestiges of his illusions, breaking through the wall of his enduring patience. It wasn't just a demand for money, it was a complete invalidation of his worth, a dismissal of his entire existence, and a cruel reminder that his love and generosity had been perceived not as gifts, but as entitlements. In that moment, the quiet, enduring love he held for his son transformed into a cold, hard clarity. He saw them for what they truly were, parasites, not family. And with that realization came a profound, empowering resolve. The well was dry. The walk back to his study felt like traversing a vast desert, each step carrying the weight of decades of unreciprocated love and silent suffering, but now, each step also felt lighter, imbued with a newfound purpose. Yet, beneath the familiar ache, a new sensation stirred within Augustus, a quiet, resolute power, a sense of reclaiming what was rightfully his peace, his dignity. He entered his study, a room filled with Eleanor's cherished books, his own architectural models, and the quiet echoes of his past life, and sat at his imposing mahogany desk. His hands, though slightly trembling from the adrenaline of the confrontation, were steady as he reached for his phone. He didn't hesitate. He didn't second-guess. The words Cale had screamed at him echoed, no longer as a wound, but as a catalyst, a rallying cry for self-preservation. Go live in the streets, old man. Fine, he thought. If they believed he was a burden, a relic, then they would learn what life was like without the relic's constant funding. His first call was to Mr. Harrison, his longtime financial advisor, a man who had managed Eleanor's vast estate for decades and understood the intricate web of Augustus's finances better than anyone. Mr. Harrison answered on the first ring, his voice calm and professionally courteous, despite the late hour. Augustus, good evening. Is everything all right? It's unusual for you to call at this time. Mr. Harrison's tone held a hint of concern, a subtle recognition that something significant had occurred. Mr. Harrison, Augustus began, his voice surprisingly steady, imbued with a quiet authority that belied his recent emotional turmoil. He needed him to initiate a comprehensive freeze and redirection of all funds currently allocated to Cale Thorne and Seraphina Thorne. Effective immediately. This includes any and all joint accounts, auxiliary credit lines, and direct payments. Mr. Harrison paused, a slight intake of breath on the other end, a moment of professional surprise. Augustus, are you certain? This is a significant step. We're talking about the mansion mortgage, the car leases, their credit lines, the grandchildren's tuition, their personal allowances, their various investment funds. Every single payment, every direct debit, every standing order, Augustus affirmed, his resolve hardening with each item named, the list a litany of their decades of unchecked consumption. The mortgage for the property at 123, Sterling Drive, cease all payments. The leases for the Mercedes S-Class, the Porsche Cayenne, and the BMW Z4, Audi A5, terminate them, or allow them to lapse, ensuring no further financial obligation. Cancel all additional credit cards linked to his accounts for Cale and Seraphina, and their personal assistants. Any existing balances on those cards, pay them off once to avoid immediate legal issues, and then close the accounts permanently. The private school tuition for Liam and Ethan, inform the school that the funding will cease at the end of the current term, or immediately if permissible by contract, and that Cale Thorne will be responsible for future payments. Any other discretionary funds, allowances, or direct transfers to their personal accounts, halt them all. No exceptions. Mr. Harrison, a seasoned professional who had navigated many a family dispute in his career, recognized the unwavering determination in Augustus's voice. He knew Augustus was not a man to make such decisions lightly, nor to reverse them once made. Understood, Augustus. He would begin processing these requests first thing in the morning. Some of these actions, like terminating car leases or stopping tuition midterm, might incur penalties or require formal notices. Is he prepared for that? He was prepared for everything, Mr. Harrison, Augustus stated firmly, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him. Do what is necessary. And if Cale or Seraphina contact you regarding this, simply inform them that all financial support has been discontinued and they should direct any inquiries to him personally. Do not elaborate. Do not offer advice. Simply state the facts. Very well, Augustus. Consider it done, Mr. Harrison replied, a hint of admiration in his voice. He had seen many wealthy families unravel, but rarely with such quiet, surgical precision. Augustus then called his estate lawyer, Mr. Davies, a stern but fair man who had also served the Thorne family for decades. He informed him of the immediate changes to his will, ensuring Cale and Seraphina would receive nothing beyond the bare minimum required by law, a symbolic gesture of compliance rather than generosity. The bulk of his remaining fortune would be directed to several charitable foundations he had long admired, focusing on education and environmental conservation. A substantial trust for his grandsons, Liam and Ethan, would be established, but with stringent clauses. It would only be accessible to them after they had reached the age of 30, demonstrated verifiable financial independence through earned income, and a tangible commitment to genuine public service, with strict provisions preventing Cale or Seraphina from accessing or influencing it in any way. He had learned his lesson. This inheritance would be a tool for growth, not a means for endless consumption. The next few days were unusually quiet in the mansion. Cale and Seraphina were still basking in the glow of their anticipated grand tour, too self-absorbed in their final planning details and social engagements to notice the subtle shift in Augustus's demeanor or the unusual silence from his study. Their world, built on unshakable foundations of convenience, seemed impervious to change. The first ripple of panic, small and easily dismissed, occurred 3 days later. Seraphina was at a high-end boutique, attempting to purchase a new diamond necklace, a bauble she deemed absolutely essential for the upcoming Mediterranean cruise, when her primary credit card, linked to Augustus's auxiliary account, was declined. Impossible, she huffed at the bewildered sales associate, her voice a mixture of indignation and disbelief. There must be some mistake. This card has an unlimited limit. It always works. She called Cale, complaining bitterly about the incompetent bank. Cale, annoyed, dismissed it as a bank glitch and told her to use another card. She did, one of her own, which had a much lower limit and promptly maxed out, leaving her fuming but still oblivious. They didn't connect it to Augustus. Why would they? He was their inexhaustible resource. A week passed. The first serious blow came in the form of a late payment notice for the Porsche Cayenne, an automatic payment that had inexplicably failed. Seraphina, furious, called the leasing company, convinced it was their error. "There's an issue with your direct debit, Mrs. Thorne," the agent explained calmly, with a practiced politeness. "The last 2 payments have been returned. The account linked to the payments appears to have been closed." "That's absurd. My father-in-law handles all our finances. He never misses a payment," she exclaimed, a faint tremor of unease beginning to snake through her composure. "Perhaps you should contact him then, Mrs. Thorne, as the account linked to these payments appears to have been closed and the responsibility for the lease transferred," the agent suggested, his tone unhelpful. Seraphina's alarm bells began to ring, a discordant clang in her usually harmonious world. She called Augustus, her voice now edged with a nascent fear. He merely stated, his voice polite, devoid of emotion, yet firm and unyielding, he was no longer responsible for their vehicular expenses, Seraphina. She and Cale would need to make arrangements. He offered no further explanation, no hint of a concession. Cale, meanwhile, discovered his own difficulties. His weekly allowance, a substantial sum that landed in his account every Friday, didn't appear. He called Mr. Harrison's office, only to be met with a polite but unyielding response from his secretary, "Mr. Thorne, Mr. Harrison has instructed us to direct all financial inquiries regarding your accounts to Mr. Augustus Thorne directly. We cannot comment further. Our records indicate that all direct transfers have been suspended." The cracks in their gilded cage were becoming impossible to ignore, spreading rapidly through their illusion of security. The initial annoyance quickly escalated into genuine concern, then a simmering panic. They tried to confront Augustus that evening, cornering him in the living room. But he simply stated, his expression impassive, he had made certain changes to his financial arrangements. "These changes are final. They would be receiving formal notifications shortly regarding various accounts. His decision was absolute. He then excused himself, leaving them bewildered and increasingly agitated, their usual bluster replaced by a dawning sense of dread. The next few days brought a barrage of distressing news. A letter from the private school informed them that Liam and Ethan's tuition for the upcoming semester had not been paid and would not be, citing the direct transfer account closure. The mortgage company sent a stern notice about impending foreclosure if the substantial outstanding balance was not settled immediately, their automated system indifferent to their pleas. Their personal credit cards, the ones Augustus had allowed them to use for years, supplementing their own meager savings, were all declined, leaving them stranded in restaurants and embarrassed at checkouts, their usual easy access to luxury abruptly cut off. The reality was beginning to sink in, slowly, painfully. The financial spigot had not merely slowed to a trickle, it had been completely, irrevocably turned off. Panic, cold and sharp, began to grip Cale and Serafina, their accustomed world teetering precariously on the brink of collapse. The full weight of the situation crashed down on Cale and Serafina when the repo man arrived to repossess the sleek Mercedes S-Class and the luxurious Porsche Cayenne within the same week. The sheer public humiliation, amplified by their neighbors' curious glances and the quiet whispers that spread like wildfire through their exclusive community, ignited a furious desperation within them. Cale's face was a mask of disbelief and raw fury, Serafina's contorted with rage, fear, and a profound sense of injustice. Their opulent life was crumbling around them, and the source of their past comfort, Augustus, remained maddeningly serene, a silent, immovable monolith. They marched into Augustus's study, uninvited, their faces red with fury and indignation, their carefully constructed personas of refinement completely stripped away. Cale slammed the door shut behind him, the sound echoing ominously in the quiet, orderly room, a stark contrast to their chaotic emotions. "What in God's name is going on, Father?" Cale roared, his voice hoarse with a mixture of disbelief, genuine terror, and a sense of betrayal. "The cars! They took the cars! And the school called. They're threatening to expel Liam and Ethan if tuition isn't paid by the end of the week. What have you done? Have you completely lost your mind?" Serafina, usually composed in her materialism, her poise rarely ruffled, was visibly shaking, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. Her eyes, wide and panicked, scanned the room as if searching for an escape, for some hidden lever that would restore their former life. "Augustus, this isn't funny. Our credit cards are all declined. We can't even buy groceries. Are you trying to ruin us? What about our trip? We leave next week. How are we supposed to pay for anything? This is a nightmare." Augustus looked up from his book, a rare first edition of a classic architectural treatise, his gaze calm and steady, utterly unperturbed by their histrionics. He slowly closed the antique leather-bound volume and placed it carefully on his desk, the deliberate movement a testament to his composure. His tranquility infuriated them further, fueling their desperate rage. "He had done precisely what he said he would do, Cale," Augustus said, his voice quiet, yet cutting through their frantic energy like a razor, each word precise and deliberate. "He had ceased all financial support. Every single penny. The mortgage, the car leases, their credit lines, the children's tuition, all of it. He was no longer their endless resource." Cale's face went white, then mottled with anger, a grotesque mask of fury. "But why? This is madness. You can't just do this. We're your family. This is our inheritance. You're a wealthy man, you have plenty to spare. You're punishing us for nothing." He tried to move closer, his fists clenched, but Augustus's calm demeanor seemed to hold him at bay, an invisible wall of resolve. "Is it?" Augustus's voice was low, contemplative, yet each word was delivered with the force of a hammer blow, shattering their illusions. "Was it their inheritance, Cale? Or was it Eleanor's legacy, which he, in his misguided love and profound grief, chose to invest in their happiness, in their every comfort? For decades, he poured everything into ensuring their comfort, their luxury, their every whim. Did Cale remember when he insisted on that sprawling mansion? He paid the $1.5 million down payment. Every single month for 10 years, he paid the $28,000 mortgage. The property taxes, the utilities, the staff, all him. Did Cale recall his endless procession of luxury cars? The Mercedes, the Porsche, the Autos for his sons? All paid for by him. Serafina's designer clothes, her bottomless shopping sprees? Their endless vacations, their lavish parties, Cale's dubious business ventures? Every single one funded by his empty wallet, as Cale so callously put it. He had given them everything and received nothing but contempt. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes boring into Cale's, the intensity of his gaze unwavering. And what did he receive in return? Demands. Disrespect. Contempt. They excluded him from their lives, mocked his simple pleasures, treated him as an ATM rather than a father. They saw his generosity not as a gift, but as an obligation, a birthright. They saw him as a relic, someone to be ignored until they needed another handout, another large sum wired into their accounts. Serafina interjected, her voice rising in a desperate, manipulative plea. But Augustus, think of the grandchildren. Liam and Ethan. They'll be ruined. They won't be able to go to their prestigious school. Their friends will mock them. Their future will be destroyed. Her voice dripped with feigned concern, hoping to exploit his known love for his grandsons, a lever she had pulled countless times before. Augustus's gaze shifted to her, equally unwavering, seeing through her transparent ploy. Ah, the grandchildren. The convenient lever they always pulled. Did they ever consider what kind of example they were setting for them, Serafina? That money was a right, not a privilege? That one could live a life of endless consumption without contributing anything of value. He funded their elite education, their every desire, hoping to foster responsible young men, capable of building their own lives. But all he saw was a reflection of their own entitlement. They rarely spoke to him unless it was to ask for more. Did she truly believe they were better off living a lie, funded by a man she so openly despised, a man they both treated with such disdain? Cale, seeing that emotional manipulation was failing, tried a different tactic, threats, a last, desperate grasp for control. You'll regret this, father. You're old. You'll need us. Who will take care of you when you're truly infirm? We'll make sure you end up in a public home, alone, with no one to care for you. A ghost of a smile touched Augustus's lips, a smile utterly devoid of humor, tinged with a profound sadness for the son he had lost. Was that a threat, Cale? After years of providing for his every need, Cale believed he was so helpless? He had made his arrangements. He had excellent doctors, nurses, and a robust financial plan for his future, entirely independent of Cale's care. He had friends, true friends, who valued him for who he was, not for what he could provide. And as for his infirmity, the greatest infirmity he had suffered was enabling their parasitic existence for so long, sacrificing his own peace of mind for their endless demands. He rose from his chair, a figure of quiet dignity and immense resolve, his posture straighter, his spirit unbroken. They demanded he go live in the streets, old man. They called him a relic, living off his dead wife's money. They told him to just give them what they need. Well, Cale, Serafina, consider this, he had given them what they needed for decades. He had given them far more than they deserved. And now, he was giving them the opportunity to learn what it means to stand on their own 2 feet. To earn their own way. To experience the consequences of their choices. This was his final gift to them. He walked towards the door, his back straight, his head held high, a man unburdened. His decision was final. There would be no reversal. No negotiation. No discussion. They had used his love, his grief, and his fortune to build a life of superficiality and contempt. He was reclaiming his peace, his dignity, and his future. They were on their own. He opened the door and walked out, leaving Cale and Seraphina in the opulent study, their faces a mixture of shock, fury, and dawning horror. The silence that filled the room after his departure was deafening, amplified by the crumbling of their world, a world built on sand. Cale and Seraphina stood frozen in the study, the echoes of Augustus's calm, damning words reverberating in the silence, each syllable a hammer blow against their reality. For a long moment they simply stared at the closed door, unable to comprehend the irreversible shift that had just occurred. They had never truly believed Augustus would cut them off. It was unthinkable. He was their personal ATM, their safety net, their endless wellspring of luxury, a fixed point in their extravagant universe. Yet, his voice, devoid of the usual paternal softness and tinged with an unfamiliar steel, had carried an authority they had never heard before, an unyielding finality. Seraphina was the first to break the stupor, her carefully constructed composure shattering into 1,000 pieces like an expensive vase dropped from a great height. He can't do this to us," she shrieked, her voice high-pitched with hysteria, her hands flying to her head. "What about the house? The mortgage? We'll lose everything. Our reputation. Our friends. Liam and Ethan will be out on the street. This is an act of pure cruelty." Cale, his face still pale with shock, finally moved, pacing frantically like a caged animal, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "This is insane. He's lost his mind. He's senile. We need to get a lawyer. We need to fight this. It's our inheritance. He can't just take it away." His voice was a blend of impotent rage and desperate denial, a man facing an abyss he had never imagined. They spent the rest of the evening in a frantic, uncoordinated scramble, a chaotic dance of desperation. Cale made a series of increasingly agitated phone calls to Mr. Harrison's office, only to be met with the same polite stonewalling. All inquiries must be directed to Mr. Augustus Thorne. He called the mortgage company, the car leasing companies, the school, each call confirmed Augustus's actions with chilling consistency. The accounts were either frozen, closed, or responsibility transferred. The Mediterranean cruise, which they had barely begun to pay for with their own, now maxed-out credit cards, was immediately cancelled by the travel agency after the final payment, typically made by Augustus, failed to clear. The illusion of their grand vacation evaporated in a puff of unpaid invoices. The next morning, the reality became brutally clear, a relentless tide of consequences. Their lavish lifestyle, once a seamless tapestry of privilege, began to unravel thread by thread. The housekeeper, Maria, who had worked for them for years and was paid directly by Augustus, informed them she had received her final payment and would not be returning. Her calm, almost sorrowful departure left a void. The gardener and pool cleaner followed suit, leaving behind an increasingly unkempt landscape. The mansion, once immaculately maintained, began to show the first signs of neglect, dust gathering in corners, leaves accumulating on the driveway, the pool turning a murky green. The boys, Liam and Ethan, returned from school in a state of bewildered anger, their faces flushed with humiliation. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" Liam demanded, his voice laced with indignation, his usual swagger replaced by confusion. "The bursar called us in. They said our tuition hasn't been paid. Everyone was looking at us. It was so embarrassing." Ethan, usually more reserved, added, his voice trembling, "My art teacher said I couldn't continue private lessons unless the fees were settled. This is so humiliating. All my friends know." Cale and Seraphina, overwhelmed and ill-equipped, snapped at them, telling them to stop complaining and figure it out, phrases they had never had to utter before, echoing Augustus's own parting words to them. Their social circle, meticulously built on appearances and shared extravagance, quickly began to fray. Dinner invitations stopped coming. Friends who had eagerly accepted their hospitality for years suddenly became unavailable, their excuses thin and transparent. Seraphina's weekly lunch group at the exclusive country club subtly distanced themselves, their whispers about the Thornes' financial troubles growing louder and more open. Cale found himself making excuses for why he couldn't play golf at the most prestigious courses or join their friends for lavish weekend trips, his social calendar suddenly empty. The illusion of their wealth was shattered, and with it, their social standing crumbled. The biggest threat loomed large: the mortgage. With the payments stopped, the bank's notices became increasingly dire, threatening legal action. Foreclosure was a very real possibility, not just a distant nightmare. They faced the horrifying prospect of losing the mansion, the very symbol of their status, the foundation of their identity. Meanwhile, Augustus was experiencing a profound and liberating shift. The initial calm resolve had settled into a deep sense of peace, a quiet joy that resonated through his very being. The heavy weight he had carried for a decade, the burden of unreciprocated love and immense financial responsibility, had lifted. He felt lighter, clearer, almost youthful, as if shedding years of emotional baggage. The day after the confrontation, he called an old university friend, Arthur Pendleton, a retired professor of history whom he hadn't spoken to properly in years, their conversations having dwindled to brief pleasantries. "Arthur," Augustus said, his voice imbued with a newfound lightness, a genuine warmth, he was wondering if he'd be interested in a trip. Perhaps that historical tour of the Scottish Highlands they always talked about, the one with the ancient castles and misty lochs? Arthur, initially surprised by the unexpected call, quickly warmed to the idea, his own voice filling with enthusiasm. "Augustus." "My dear man," he thought Augustus would never ask. He'd be absolutely delighted. He'd started researching it just last week, as it happens. They spent an hour on the phone, planning the trip, discussing books, and sharing genuine laughter, the kind of deep, meaningful conversation Augustus had yearned for. It was a stark contrast to the transactional interactions he had grown accustomed to. Augustus also began rediscovering old hobbies, passions he had suppressed in his devotion to Eleanor and then to Cale's needs. He dusted off his painting easel, something he hadn't touched since Eleanor's passing, and lost himself for hours in the vibrant colors of a landscape, the brushstrokes a meditative escape. He spent hours in his garden, not merely walking, but tending to the roses himself, feeling the rich soil between his fingers, connecting with the earth. He started cooking simple, delicious meals for himself, experimenting with new recipes, savoring the flavors and the quiet solitude of his kitchen. He often found himself humming, a tune he hadn't hummed in years. He saw Cale and Serafina occasionally, usually when they were making desperate, futile attempts to manipulate him. They tried tearful apologies, promising to change their ways, to be better children, only for Augustus to calmly remind them of Cale's brutal words, "Go live in the streets, old man." They tried to evoke guilt about the grandchildren, to which Augustus simply responded, his voice firm, "Their future is now in their hands." It is time they took responsibility, as parents should. Their pleas, once so effective, now fell on deaf ears, met with an unyielding resolve that left them bewildered. The mansion, once a source of constant noise and shallow activity, was eerily quiet, the silence now a comfort rather than a void. Cale and Serafina were often closeted in their study, arguing about bills, looking for solutions, or desperately trying to sell off expensive possessions to make ends meet, their voices raised in frustration. The sound of their increasingly desperate pleas and frustrated outbursts was the only constant now. Augustus, in his peaceful wing of the house, simply observed, a serene smile on his face. The consequences of their actions had finally arrived, and he, for the first time in a very long time, felt truly free, truly alive. Months passed, and the seasons turned. The initial shock for Cale and Serafina had given way to a grinding, brutal reality. The mansion, once their fortress of luxury and the envy of their peers, was indeed foreclosed upon, the bank showing no mercy. The humiliation of the eviction, complete with news crews eager to capture the downfall of the Thorne dynasty, was a public spectacle they would never forget, their faces plastered across local news channels as a cautionary tale. They were forced to move into a modest, two-bedroom apartment in a far less prestigious neighborhood, their remaining possessions, a shadow of their former extravagance, crammed into a cramped space that felt suffocating after the grandeur they had known. The boys, Liam and Ethan, were pulled out of their private school and enrolled in a local public school, a jarring transition. Stripped of their designer clothes and luxury cars, they struggled to fit in, facing a world where status was earned, not inherited. Liam, once a popular jock, found his arrogance ill-suited to his new environment and struggled academically without the personalized tutoring Augustus had always provided. Ethan, who had never known hardship, became withdrawn and sullen, his artistic endeavors put on hold as his parents constantly bickered about money, their once vibrant home now filled with tension. Cale, desperate, tried a succession of low-paying jobs, a car salesman, a real estate agent, a glorified assistant, none of which lasted long. His ingrained sense of entitlement made him unable to take orders, accept criticism, or truly apply himself. Serafina, equally unequipped for real-world employment, attempted to start an online boutique with her remaining designer clothes, which quickly failed due to her lack of business acumen and inability to manage finances. Their relationship, once bound by shared extravagance and mutual disdain for Augustus, was now frayed by constant financial stress and bitter mutual recrimination. They blamed each other, they blamed Augustus, but never themselves. Augustus, meanwhile, was flourishing, blooming into a new, vibrant phase of his life. The mansion, now empty of its parasitic occupants, felt like a sanctuary, but also a symbol of a past he was ready to shed. He decided to sell it, not out of spite, but to simplify his life further and divest himself of any lingering ties to their shared past. He moved into a beautiful, spacious penthouse apartment overlooking a vibrant city park, a place he had always admired for its perfect blend of tranquility and urban energy. He embraced a life of purpose, genuine connection, and rediscovered passions. He embarked on the Scottish Highlands trip with Arthur, a journey filled with intellectual discussions, historical discoveries, hearty laughter, and long walks through breathtaking landscapes. They planned future trips, rekindling a friendship that had been dormant for too long, a bond built on shared interests and mutual respect. Augustus joined a local book club, rediscovering his passion for literature and engaging in lively debates that stimulated his mind. He volunteered at a community center, using his architectural skills to design a new wing for a youth program, finding immense satisfaction in contributing to something meaningful, building for the future rather than simply funding consumption. He took up gardening again, not in a vast estate, but in a small, vibrant community garden plot, connecting with fellow enthusiasts, sharing stories and tips. His phone, once a source of dread due to Cale's endless demands, now rang with calls from genuine friends, people who sought his company, not his money. He hosted small, intimate dinners in his new apartment, sharing stories and laughter with people who truly valued his presence, his wisdom, and his warmth. He even started taking art classes, exploring his creative side, his paintings reflecting a newfound joy and freedom, vibrant and unburdened. Augustus occasionally heard snippets about Cale and Serafina through mutual acquaintances, never seeking them out, but unable to completely avoid the news. He learned that Cale had finally found a steady job as a mid-level manager, a far cry from his previous investor lifestyle, but a necessary step towards self-sufficiency. Serafina, humbled by necessity, had taken a part-time job as a sales associate in a department store, ironically, selling the very designer brands she once bought without a thought. Liam and Ethan were slowly adjusting, beginning to understand the value of hard work and self-reliance, forced by circumstances to mature beyond their privileged upbringing, their conversations now less about material possessions and more about their experiences. Augustus felt no schadenfreude, only a quiet certainty that they were finally learning the lessons he had tried, and failed, to teach them for years. The ultimate lesson was clear, not just for his family, but for Augustus himself: true love and respect cannot be bought with money, nor can genuine happiness be found in endless consumption. Augustus had spent decades sacrificing his own well-being, his peace of mind, and his desire for authentic connection, all for a family that saw him as a means to an end. His decision, born of deep hurt and profound disrespect, had not been about punishment, but about liberation, for himself, and ironically, for his family, by forcing them to confront the stark reality of their own capabilities. He had learned that the greatest act of love, especially towards oneself, is to draw boundaries, to reclaim one's dignity, and to recognize that true wealth lies not in the size of one's bank account, but in the richness of one's spirit and the genuine connections one fosters. Augustus Thorne, the relic who was told to go live in the streets, was now living a life richer, freer, and infinitely more fulfilling than any he had known before. His empty wallet was now funding his true, unburdened self. This story of Augustus Thorne, his sacrifice, his breaking point, and his ultimate liberation, is just one example of the incredible journeys we share on this channel. If you were moved by Augustus's strength and resilience, you'll find many more powerful narratives of justice, transformation, and life lessons right here. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next story of triumph and truth. We release new videos regularly, bringing you tales that will inspire and provoke thought. And now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever encountered similar ingratitude or entitlement in your own life? What was your breaking point? Or, if you were in Augustus's shoes, what would you have done differently? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We read every single one and value your perspective. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.